Finding that perfect gift for someone can be a real challenge. You want something that looks good. You want something that they're actually going to use. You want something that's personal. And we're going to take our pile of scrap that we have today, and we're going to turn it into 4 amazing wooden gifts that you can give for any occasion throughout the year. These projects are simple to make. They don't take up a lot of time, and at the end of this, they'll look like they came from a high-end store. Another bonus, you get to use up a lot of your scrap wood. Let's get into it. Just not this one. And this one. All right, up first, we're gonna make a cedar soap dish. This is one of our all-time favorite gifts. It's super practical, easy to batch out, smells amazing. And cedar is naturally rot resistant, so it's great in applications like next to a sink or even right in the shower. This is some leftover scrap that we had from some garden projects. Cedar deck boards that we got from Lowe's. The nice thing about this design and the setup is that you just have to cut 3-inch pieces to start, and then we'll make this design that you see here with kerfs on the table saw. And on the back, it has an alternating pattern. What's nice about that is that it actually makes little drainage holes. So when you have your soap on here, it'll drain through and also allow the airflow so it'll dry out. So let's get over and we'll get started building this out. All right, let's start at the miter saw and set a 3-inch setup block. This will allow us to batch out these cuts. And every time we go through, we want to make sure we stop the saw blade so there isn't any kickback. All right, now we're at the table saw using a small part sled. We're gonna mark the center of this. This is about 1 inch, and we'll set the depth of the blade to be a little bit bigger than 1/2 inch. All right, our first cut is gonna be right in the center, so we'll mark the center and we'll run the kerf of the saw blade right through the middle. For the next cuts, we're gonna use a setup block. So the second cuts will be at 1.75 inches. Then the next cut will be at 7/8 of an inch. For each of these cuts, we'll flip it 180 degrees and make sure we get the opposite cut. All right, let's flip it over now and we'll make the perpendicular cuts to the ones we did. These will be 1 inch offset using the setup block. Now we've created a template that we can use for any future batching of the soap dishes. We can use that to set it to the kerf and set our setup block and make each of our cuts that we need to do based on how many we need to cut. This is really handy when we are cutting an 8-foot or 10-foot board when we have 30 to 40 of these to batch out at a time. All right, now we've got all the grooves cut into them, all the kerf cuts. They're all roughed out, but we want to get it to this rounded state. So we're going to use our sander. The fastest way we found is to do it on this part. Just remember with these, you only want to work on half of it. You don't want to put it on this side because it could kick it out. We can also use the top belt to kind of ease the sides. We have a slight chamfer. And we'll go through each of these, adding the round corners to them. This doesn't have to be perfect, just eyeball it, trying to just make them look consistent. All right, let's do each of the surfaces. Just give it a little rough sanding here. Make sure you're going with the grain so that we don't add any lines. We'll hit each side. Next, we'll add a little chamfer to each of the edges to break the edge. This adds a little softness to it. And then on the corners, we do this little spin move where we get that rounded chamfer. And just like that, we were able to batch out a ton of these soap dishes. Now we're just left with a little bit of sandpaper with our sanding blocks. I'm gonna hit it with 80 and 120. Then we'll wrap this up and show you how to package this up. Now you could be done just like this. These look great. Pair it with your favorite bar of soap or wrap it in some twine, give that for the gift. What we do is we do a little bit of branding on ours. We actually sell these locally at some art shops next to some artisan soaps and stuff like that. All right, our soap dish is done. Look at that, right on the sink there, ready to go. All right, up next, we're gonna make a classic set of hardwood coasters. This is a great way to use up some of those hardwoods that you have in your scrap pile, but the way that we go at it is a little bit different using this that I'll get into and show you that in a little bit. Let's get into building it. These cherry boards should work really well. These are some defective boards that were some shelves that my neighbor gave me. I just marked off where I want to cut these. Let's trim these up at the miter saw. It doesn't have to be perfect. All right, now at the table saw, we'll set this to 4 inches. This will be our final width of our coasters. Now let's cut them in half. So we're gonna set the board up to be roughly in the middle and we're slowly going to pass through and raise the blade up a little bit at a time. When you're coming to the last cut here, just let it stop naturally. Be careful of kickback, and then we'll just trim up the little bit of extra on this last piece. Now let's hit it with some heavy sandpaper here. I think this is 60 grit. Get rid of all the burn marks. Now back at the table saw, we'll measure out the width and then set that to be 4 inches as well. So we'll have a 4x4 coaster. All right, now our coasters are ready to go. We cut them down to 4 inches, sanded them up nicely. What we're gonna do is we're gonna add a design with these flutes built into this. We're gonna use our router and guide templates, or collars, I think they're also called. I'm using the Rockler set here. What this allows me to do is to use a template like this. I 3D printed this. The inside here is inset at 4 inches. I have a nice channel that this piece of the collar will be able to ride into and allow me to do a controlled cut, nice and detailed there. And so I take my 4-inch piece of wood, I place it inside the template, snaps in nicely, and then I just created this really simple 2x4 jig. This is just to help stabilize it. So the inside here is 4 inches as well. Put that down there like that. And what that allows me to do is when I go to make a cut, I can just have this nice controlled experience here. You know, it rides along this base that I've made. There's a little bit of extra room, and I can do this. I can plunge down whatever depth I want. In this case, we'll probably just do a little bit because it's a coaster. We don't want to go actually through the whole thing. One thing to note when you're setting up this jig, when you put your piece in there, you want it to be just a little bit proud. So you build this, and sometimes you need a couple pieces of wood in there to do that. So that'll fit in there. So when it's in the template, it has some surface to push down onto and sits relatively flat. It's not going to move much. So then our router with our templating guide sits on those. And we'll move nicely across those. So let's set the depth that we want. We only probably want to go down 1/8 of an inch. I have this spacer, aluminum spacer. On our router, plunge router has this adjustable piece here and this piece here. So we'll put it on its highest setting so it lines up with that. This is loose. And what we'll do is we'll bring this down onto here and we'll push our router all the way down until it touches the surface of the wood. At that point, we know that we're right about 1/8 above that. And when we go now, then we go into the material, it'll go down that 1/8 of an inch. We've got our router all lined up, and now we can get to routing. I'm using a basic 1/4 inch straight cut bit for this. I noticed that there was a lot of sawdust building up inside of there, so I had to do a couple passes sometimes, clear it out in between each. So after that, it was nice and clean. If you have a spiral upcut bit, that would work really well here, plus some dust collection, something I'm gonna work on for my router. All right, let's check it out. I don't know if we can see down in there the grooves. Take it off. Yeah, look at that. That's really cool. We've got nice even grooves, nothing off. Really easy to work with. Obviously, you're constrained by your print bed on how big you can make these, but you could end up doing some creative stuff with some puzzle piece, interlocking, gluing pieces. But yeah, look at that coaster. Let's do that to the other 3. We'll have a full set. All right, now our coasters are done. They look amazing. Check them out. We used that router template to get that design in there. We got 4 out of 1 of those boards. Remember those shells that we salvaged? Now we have to think about how we're going to finish this. So since we'll be probably putting some liquids on here, or maybe some sweat from a drink will come in here, so we want to protect them. My go-to is the Total Boat Halcyon. This is the clear satin, so it'll keep that natural look. I usually do 3 coats. Each coat usually is about an hour or less. And then in between coats, I like to use this like 4-0 Scotch-Brite type sanding pad. It just breaks the surface in between there so it gets a nice sheen when you're done. And then we'll probably break the edge just a little bit to make sure that it's not super sharp. But I like the clean look of it, nice squares with the rounded, it complements each other. One cool thing that you could do with this, you know, if you wanted to, you could even flip it sideways and you could do a basket weave pattern, or we could do like dark inside, like I could paint black in there and then seal it all, and then you'd have that contrast from the inside and the outside with the cherry. That might look really cool. So many possibilities, and so many possibilities that we could do with the template, different designs and stuff like that. So let's get these finished up. I like to use a small foam brush to be able to get into the little cracks, clean up any of the excess. Just a thin coat, you don't want to go too much. And then in between coats, we'll hit it up with that Scotch-Brite. These coasters will go great on any end table, coffee table, or furniture that you want to protect. All right, up next, we're going to make this really cool modern looking trivet. This is a highly functional design. The airflow is really nice. We're going to utilize some scrap cherry from those shelves that we saw earlier. And we're going to use a walnut log that we actually milled up, let dry for a couple of years, and then we cut it into these really thin strips for the slats. So really excited about doing this one, some new techniques, and let's get into it. All right, let's figure out what sizes we want to make for these. So I think when I trimmed these up before, they were about 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, like 0.2-ish. So we'll want to run them through the planer in a little bit. And then for the cherry, probably about 1.5 inches or so for each of the side pieces. So we'll be able to get 2 out of this one piece. Then for the length of the cherry pieces will probably be about 8 inches. We'll keep it a little bit long for now and we'll trim it up when we get done with it. So we'll have a little bit extra. Then for the walnut slats, I'll probably do about 3/4 of an inch for the height of these. All right, let's get our slats all the same thickness. So we'll run them through the planer. Now over at the table saw, we can rip these down to that 1.5 inches that we talked about. So we'll be able to get at least 2 out of this board. And then we'll run our walnut slats through and do that 3/4 of an inch. All right, perfect. Now we've got everything roughed out. Let's figure out some spacing. I need to play around with this to get a good size. I think I like the 3/8. I did 1/4 before and it felt a little tight. So I think I'm going to do 3/8 inch spacing between where the gaps. So I need to now mark out the slots that I'm going to have to cut on the table saw. Be almost like a box joint. So let's lay those out right now. I'm just going to grab a piece of double-sided tape to stick these together so that they're all lined up. When we draw our lines, they'll be nice and even. So that got our spacing all 3/8, then our slats 3/8 all the way across. And this is a little bit of extra, so we'll just cut that off and that'll leave 3/8 on both ends. I'm just going to transfer all of these down to the side so that when I cut it, it's going to be cutting like this. So I'll be able to see where I need to make my cuts. All right, let's use our crosscut sled on our table saw and we'll set a 1/2 inch depth. That'll leave about 1/4 of an inch exposed that we can play with on the top. So we'll go through and we'll notch out and we'll test each of the slots with a sample piece as we go so that we know that it's the right size. We'll proceed through all of the cuts until we get to the end. All right, let's line them up and then we'll cut off that extra at the end. Let's spend a little bit of time over on the sander cleaning things up a little bit. Just be careful when you're sanding like this so it doesn't fly away from you. All right, let's tape them all together, line them up, and then we'll mark 12 inches. That'll allow us to cut it easily on the miter saw. Okay, perfect. We've got them all at length. Let's do a quick dry fit to see how everything fits. Looks great. All right, let's get this all glued up. I'm gonna use some Type-On 3. So we'll drop a little bead in each of those, line it up, we'll bust this out. You really don't need that much glue. I would try to centralize it in the middle of the groove, prevent some squeeze out. That'll just make it easier to sand after we get done here. Let's do a quick cleanup, then we'll put a board and some weight on top and leave it to dry overnight. All right, let's add a curved detail to the end. We'll mark off the center and the sides, and we'll use a ruler bent in the center to bend out to the edge. Then we'll head back to the sander to take off the bulk of the material, and then we'll clean it up on the top so it's nice and smooth and has a nice curve to it. Now let's sand down those sharp edges, and we'll add a little bit of a taper, which will bring it down to the level of the cherry and give a nice little design pattern there. All right, we'll use some sandpaper, get rid of all of our glue marks, clean up the edges, get rid of the sharpness. I had a few gaps that I wanted to fill in, so I took some of the sawdust from sanding and mixed it with some glue, made my own wood putty, then sanded it clean. All right, it's time to add the finish to our trivet. and we've removed all the sawdust. It's all dusted, we're ready to go. My brother had a little bit left in here of this Rubio Monaco. I've never used it before. This is the pure. Supposedly, according to ChatGPT and other sources, this is going to be a pretty good finish on this trivet for the heat, but not for like a hot cast iron skillet or something like that. Obviously, you don't want to put that on wood. Let whatever you put down a little cool, but this will be a standard trivet usage. The other thing that I was reading about was just pure tung oil. That could work as well if you have that. This is a lot cheaper. This is, I don't even know how much that is nowadays, but I use this on like salad bowls and stuff that we've turned. Like you have to apply it a couple times a year though. So that would be the downfall of using that. You'd have to do it probably more often than, I don't know, the frequency would be a lot less than this. So let's mix up some Rubio and we'll apply it and go from there. I ended up mixing up way too much. A little bit goes a long way with this stuff, but I was able to use it for another project. Alright, I let that sit for a couple minutes. Now let's wipe off the excess oil as recommended by the manufacturer. This came out so good. I love the colors. It looks great on the table. And I love that two-tone look from the walnut and the cherry. Do you have somebody in your life or know somebody that's got a sunglass problem? They can't stop buying them. And when they come in, they just drop them into piles. They're everywhere. Well, I had that problem. Came up with a solution using some scrap wood and an old belt to really organize these and keep this in order. All right, let's grab some of this red oak. This looks like it'll be a good fit for this. Before we run it through the planer, let's do a quick metal check. Then we'll run it through a couple times, cleaning it up on each side. Then we'll head over to the chop saw and we'll remove some of that snipe that our planer tends to cause. This is just going to be a rough length for now. All right, now that we've cleaned up the snipe on the ends, we're down to about a little over 18 inches by about 4 and a little less than 3/4. This doesn't really matter. You know, this is a good size. You want to balance it visually. You know, this is going to go across the middle here, and then we'll stretch that across, and then it'll be, so that's a nice balance. So we want to start on this end, and let's leave it, we won't cut it to length until we get to the end, because you'll see as we go, these little loops that the sunglasses are going to hang in. We'll eventually get to a point where we'll want to balance whatever this gap is over here, this so the wood looks nice. Let's start with a fresh cut on the end of the belt. All right, let's add a little bit of a detail. We're going to use our chamfer bit on our palm router here, trim router. But before we do that, we want to find the right depth. So I have a piece of scrap wood here. We'll experiment with kind of finding that perfect bevel. You know, oak has that really sharpness. If you don't take care of it, you could cut yourself or get splinters. So we want to break that edge. Plus that'll add a nice little detail around the outside. We'll do that on 3 sides because the last side we want to eventually cut off when we get to the end there. So we have this a little bit long right now. So we'll play with this and see where we want to be. Now let's just clean up that edge. Now you could leave it natural, or you could actually stain this or apply any kind of finish you wanted to whatever look you're looking for. All right, we're gonna test the spacing that we'll wanna use. So basically we're gonna be creating loops like this that the sunglasses will slide down into. But this is one of the offcuts from here with the snipe on it. And I'm using these because I had them. These are 1.5" 4D, kind of shiny. They'll leave it nice, almost like a pin when we nail them in, but they're too long right now. So I just took a pair of pliers, like Lyman pliers, and I cut them down to 3/4 of an inch. This is 3/4 of an inch red oak. So you don't want to bust it through the outside. So a little less than 3/4 will be fine. So you can just take these, you know, I'm eyeballing it. You can mark them if you wanted to. Probably should mark them. And then with a little power, you can kind of snip them off. And then, you know, I'll go through and I'll create a bunch of those. But for our test right here, I'll show you how this works. So we'll just take this, and I didn't pre-drill, didn't do anything like that. And I'm just gonna use the end of the belt, that's the round part here. So it kind of makes like a nice secure area there. And then to get the proper height, I have this large screwdriver. You could find something else, but you don't want to use a regular screwdriver. Like this is going to be too small. See how this is a little bit bigger? That's going to give us the loop height that we want. And what I end up doing is I'll go like this, and then I'll make my loop like that. That'll give me my spacing. And then I'll get my next nail. And I'll leave, a good amount, but I want it to be raised up enough. And that's it. And that makes a nice loop like that. All right, let's apply that technique to our final project here, going one at a time, making each loop, keeping about the same spacing as we go, and we'll power through this. Shouldn't take too long, just a couple minutes. Gave us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 loops. So now that we have this, we'll just measure the distance we have here, which is 1.25 inches. We'll measure that in, make it work. 1.25 inches. There. We'll cut that. Looks good. And we'll just add our chamfer to that, and we'll see how it looks. All right, let's try it out. See, our sunglasses just fit in there nicely like that. Just go down, and they just hang. And then if you wanted one next to each other, it looks great. You could fit 9 sunglasses on there, so instead of having them on a shelf where you can maybe get like 3, or they're everywhere, now you can fit 9 up on the wall. You could just put on some command strips, those like Velcro ones that go on the wall. You could probably get away with 3. Sunglasses are so light. This probably, a pound or so. So get the 5-pound or 10-pound ones. Put a few of those on here. Stick it to the wall. If you put it where you want, should be good to go. All right, I ended up mixing up some Rubio Monaco, and I had a bunch left over. Definitely mixed too much. Now I need to apply it. I'm going to use it on the sunglass holder. So here we go. The Rubio really added like a golden tone to this. Eventually I wanted to take some of that back a little bit. So I wiped off a little bit of the excess and sanded it down with one of those Scotch-Brite pads. All right, let's see it up on the wall. This has worked out so good for ours. We have it right above a little shelf like this. You can easily take the sunglasses on and off as you need them. Well, there you have it. We were able to take our scrap pile that we had in the beginning and create 4 highly functional gifts that'd be great for any occasion. We started off with those Cedar Soap Dishes. These are our branded ones, but you could just keep like the raw natural one with a bar of soap, or just give those out. Great for teachers' gifts, any time of the year, stocking stuffers. Then we moved into our hardwood. These were cherry coasters, where we used that cool technique where we used the router with the pattern bit and that guide bushing. That was really fun. It actually inspired me to look at this Cedar Soap Dish with another pattern. So just for the top, I was able to do that one, and then for the bottom, I was able to do that one. So you can really kind of go to town with those. I'm excited to do more of those with it. Then we moved into our trivet. This was really fun to do. I love this modern design, really sleek. The curves on that, using the walnut and the cherry, was awesome. The Rubio came out really nice as well. It had a nice warm tones to it. And then we wrapped up with our sunglass holder, you know, upcycling the old belt that was there, our scrap wood, and holding 9 sunglasses. You know, this is a great mechanism that worked in our house and limits the amount of sunglasses that we actually, you know, have, but also keeps them nice and organized in one place right when we walk in. And yeah, we're excited to do more of these in the future, and hope it inspired you to actually look at your scrap pile a different way. And just with a little bit of creativity and a little bit of time, you know, you can do anything like this and be inspired as well. You know, a lot of these are an afternoon or less, you know, depending if you're bulking these out. Like if you're doing a bunch of those or a bunch of these at one time, you want to do them kind of like in a system, like do one step at a time, do all that kind of stuff. Well, thanks for coming on this scrap wood journey with us. Hope you had a good time. And if you like this type of content, feel free to subscribe and like if you want. We do a lot of similar builds with projects for the house, projects for the shop. That's a big area that we love to do. We have a really small shop, 14 by 16, and we like to get into milling our own lumber, a lot of experimenting with that. So stay tuned to all that, and we hope to see you next time inside the workshop. Have a great day. Did you hear? Yeah. Up next, it's one of our videos. I think you're gonna like it. You should check it out. Yeah.